respect for the rule of law and public safety. And so we echo the strong condemnation of yesterday's action by Economic Community of West African States and other regional and international organizations. We are monitoring the situation closely, and we are in communication with the U.S. Embassy. And so as I just mentioned earlier, we have put out an alert to the via the U.S. Embassy. They released a security alert on all Americans who are there and how they should move forward. And so we'll continue to keep a close eye on what's going on there.
And one more question. How does this administration reassure Americans who worry about the health of leaders in Congress and here at the White House because of their advanced age?
I'm not going to speak to leaders in Congress about age or about anything like that. That is for them to speak to. So what is your question exactly?
I was just wondering, how can the administration reassure Americans who are worrying about these leaders, like you said, in Congress and here at the White House?
So is your question about Congress, or is your question about leaders here? Well, I'm not going to speak to leaders in Congress.
Here at the White House?
What about your leader, the leader of Congress?
A way that this administration is reassuring Americans who have these concerns.
Look, we've been asked this question multiple times, and you have a president who, I just went through his unity agenda, what we've been able to do in a bipartisan way as it relates to issues that really matter to the American people, right? The cancer moonshot, which is actually going to make a difference with people and Americans who have family members dealing with cancer. That is something that this president has been able to do. You look at the record that he's been able to lay out when you think about the economy right now, the GDP. We just laid out the good news from the GDP and how the economy is growing. This is a president who has done historic amount of policies, of changes in this administration that has mattered to the American people. And so that's what the president's going to continue to focus on. You know, since 2019, the age comment has been out there. And what has this president done? He beat Republicans in 2020. He beat Republicans in 2022, leading with the message that American people actually cared about. When you think about lowering costs, when you think about getting the economy back on its feet, that's something that this president has been able to do. And so if you look at the work that he's done, if you look at the historic amount of, changes that he's been able to make, 13.5 million jobs created under this president, unemployment at under 4%, wages are up, inflation is moderating. That's what we care about. If we are continuing to deliver for the American people in a way that truly, truly matters.
Karine, it's been almost 2 years since the administration launched that rulemaking process to develop a federal standard for heat. And this week you said that the work is ongoing to develop that national standard. So can you give us an update on where that stands and what's taking so long?
So look, we knew that the federal law would require OSHA to go through a few steps, additional steps, right, in order to make regulatory changes, including a required small business review and consultation process that the agency is in process right now of completing. And so that's why the Department of Labor kicked this process so early in the administration, because we knew it was going to take some time. And so they have been working urgently to get this done. But I want to be clear, the department, this is Department of Labor, has been taking action to protect workers this entire time under existing law, because there is an existing law. That's how we were able to do the heat alert under existing law. And so the president also recognizing protecting workers is important from heat, and that can't wait. That cannot wait. And so, we asked the Department of Labor to do this heat alert, which is going to which is going to matter and make sure we protect those very workers. But it's going to take some time on the new standard that you just asked me. That's why, again, the Department of Labor did it so early, and so they're working very diligently to get this done.
So no timeline on how
I
much
don't
time?
have a timeline, but again, we understood that OSHA there's going to be some additional step to get there, and it's going to take some time, especially getting small businesses to, in changing regulations. And so, again, Department of Labor is on top of this, but we wanted to take a step, in between step, as we're waiting for that process, and that's why this heat alert is so incredibly important.
Got it. And secondly, you've said before that as it relates to 2x2s, it's a conversation that's had between the U.S. and the second country. It's not a unilateral decision. Today, Prime Minister Meloni is coming to the sticks. She's having a press conference at the Italian embassy. So it appears that it's the U.S. that does not want to have a joint press conference. Is that true? And if it's not, why aren't you having one?
I would not say that is true. I was not part of the deliberation on this with our National Security Council. It is a conversation, as you stated at the top, that happens between two countries. I have not asked the National Security Council on this and how those conversations went, but usually it is both countries that agree on how to move forward. You would have to really speak to the Prime Minister on how they're proceeding and doing what they're doing today.
I'm sorry, just to be clear, as press secretary, you're not part of the conversation about...
With a diplomatic conversation with another country, that goes through the NSC.
Okay, thank you.
Karine, Senator Tester said today that he expects a Ukraine supplemental request to come from the White House by the end of the month. There's not a lot of days left in the month, so I'm wondering if that timeline is accurate and if you have more specific timing or any sense of size and scope of that request.
No, I've heard this. We don't have anything to share at this time on any supplemental requests.
Kim Jong-un today met with Russia's defense minister. It was one of his first meetings with a foreign dignitary since the pandemic. He showed off some of his ballistic missiles that violate international law. I'm wondering if you have any reaction to this meeting and if it has raised concerns, whether about Russia or North Korea.
Don't have any comments about their meeting. We have always said that we leave the two countries to speak for themselves about any conversations that they have. We've been very clear about North Korea and their ballistic missiles. We've always been very clear about that. The lines, we are ready to have conversations with them. With Russia, we've been very clear about their aggressive war on Ukraine, and we've certainly have been very clear about that. And you've seen that in the alliance, the NATO alliance being stronger than it's ever been before. You've seen this leadership of this president globally. You've seen how he's brought in our partners, not just our allies, in making sure that we stand behind Ukraine as they're fighting this unjust war. I'm not going to speak to that meeting.
And just one closer to home. Congressman Comer, Delegate Holmes Norton have introduced bipartisan legislation, obviously, that would turn the RFK site back over to the D.C. government and allow for possible construction of a new stadium and additional building on that site. The president has waded into D.C. politics a few times over the last couple months. So
yes, I know. You guys have reminded me of that many times.
I'm wondering if he is supportive of this bill.
I have not talked to the president about this or the Office of Leg Affairs, so don't have anything to share on that at this time. Go ahead.
As you know, Congress is about to go out of session for several weeks. Won't be returning again until beginning and middle of September. What would the president like to see Congress do before it wraps up, possibly very late tonight or maybe tomorrow?
So look, I mean, more broadly, and I've stated this many times before, when it comes to bipartisanship and working with Congress in a way that we deliver for the American people, of course, that's always the priority for the president. We've been able to do that. The president has signed I believe more than 400 bills that were bipartisan, and many of them have been historic, that have helped the American people. I don't have a list of bills in the last, less than 24 hours before Congress goes off to a recess. But our focus is always going to be on what we can do to make the lives of Americans better, give them a little bit more breathing room, making sure that no one gets left behind, and that shows in what we've been doing the last 2 years, and we'd like to continue to do that.
Thanks. Karine, there's a report in the New York Times that the president's considering the possibility of a mutual security pact with Saudi Arabia that would involve Saudi Arabia normalizing relations with Israel. Is this something that's under consideration, and how are human rights considerations being weighed on?
So don't have anything to share on that particular reporting that you're referencing. I mean, as the president has said multiple times, anytime he meets with a leader, human rights is always something that he doesn't shy away from and speaks to, whether it's a friend or someone or any head of state. I just don't have anything to that reporting that you're reading out to me at this time.
Italy's Visit. There is precedent for a joint press conference when they come to the White House. That's happened under President Obama, President Trump. Is there something different here with this particular prime minister?
No, nothing different here. Again, when we do these bilateral visits, it's usually between, there's a diplomatic conversation that happens with our folks here and the visiting country, and a decision is made on if there is a 2+2 or how that country wants to move forward in communicating with the press. I just don't have anything. For you.
Would you be able to tell us at a later date why there isn't one? Or are you saying that we need to go and ask the Italian officials why there's no press
Well,
conference?
I was asked, they're doing their own press conference. She's going to the sticks. You can ask them why they chose that path. Not every head of state that comes here does it that way. They decide to do it differently themselves. What I can speak to is that we do have a conversation with that visiting head of state, and a decision is made. It is not made unilaterally, and the decision was to not go that route, and I leave it there. Okay.
If you could, just to follow up on that, will you circle back to us, because I know our briefings will be limited with the president going out of town, and tomorrow the president traveling. If you could circle back to confirm as our conduit, just to be clear, if the White House offered the opportunity to the Italian prime minister for a 2-2 or for a press conference to take place, and similarly while you're at it, if you could ask about all the other ones that have come previously, because there's been a lot of foreign leaders who have now come to the sticks, which many of us in the room in the past have not had that experience before, certainly not on a 100+ degree heat index day.
I forgot about the weather. That's a good point.
So as our conduit, if you would find out those answers, and also what the White House, what the official policy is on those matters, and why it has changed over this administration versus years past. I'll leave that to you to circle back to us on. But let me ask you about Vladimir Putin, and he's now pledged to provide free grain products to at least 6 African nations right now. Nations that we're not going to be able to receive that because the Russians are blocking the Ukrainians from providing that grain to those countries. Vladimir Putin is saying that this is a function of Western hypocrisy. Trying to get the U.S.'s response to that, how the U.S. will proceed in this situation most broadly.
Just really quickly, just to reiterate on your first question, it is not done unilaterally. This is a conversation that happens, a diplomatic conversation that happens with both teams, right? With the visiting country, and also.
That's why I just want to know if you could ask if
we
offered them the opportunity.
No, I heard your question. I'm just saying that it is not done unilaterally. So, but I hear your question, and as you said, I am the conduit, and happy to circle back. I haven't said that word. Okay, Vladimir Putin. So first, the Russia's unilateral withdrawal from the Black Sea grain initiative, as you know, which had been instrumental in reducing world food prices, as well as Russia's attacks on Ukraine's grain shortage and transportation infrastructure, have caused, as you know, significant volatility in grain and food prices. The Black Sea initiative had resulted in more than 32 million tons of grain being exported to world markets. Russia's actions to take such a significant amount of food products off the world markets will exacerbate hunger in some of the hardest hit areas of the world, including Africa. So while we would welcome any actual contributions to alleviate global food insecurity, or to paraphrase what UN Secretary General Guterres said just moments ago, and I quote, "A handful of donation to some countries cannot replace the millions and millions of tons of grain export that help stabilize food prices around the world." And I also add, despite Russia's rhetoric, they actually invest very little in Africa, accounting for a mere 1% of the foreign direct investment that goes to the continent. And as Secretary Blinken noted, and he said this earlier today, they also contribute about 0.02% of the budget of the World Food Program. So as far as have we considered, the onus is on Russia to show that it isn't an empty promise, if that is exactly what they're going to do. After all, they began the Russia-Africa summit with significantly diminished influence as a result of their actions, as we have seen, and more than half of the countries who had attended the previous summit are not attending this one, and so we'll see.
Hey, let me go back to the first question of the briefing. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No.
Well, is there?
I just said no. I just
That's my other
answered. Go
question
ahead.
instead.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Karine, and thank you for your nice words, and thank you to the whole press team. I've got two follow-ups, one on Niger, one on Russia. On Niger, just more broadly, can you talk a little bit about the concern of the United States about instability in Niger, given what a partner it is for the U.S., the Europeans, in the fight against extremism in the Sahel region?
So it's all unfolding right now. Just don't want to get into hypotheticals. You're right, Niger is an important partner. So we're closely monitoring the situation. I just don't want to get into hypotheticals from here. It is unfolding, and we're just going to continue to monitor and keep a close eye.
And on Russia, a follow-up on the grain announcement. When you look at the 6 countries that Vladimir Putin chose, among them there's Mali, Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Eritrea. These are mostly, I think 5 of the 6 were ones that refused to vote against Russia in their UN resolution. How do you interpret that move by Vladimir Putin? Is it a sign of strength with the African continent, sign of weakness?
I'm not going to get into Mr. Putin's head. I'm just not. I've just laid out what our thoughts are on this and how he's lost standing, obviously, globally. If you even look at this summit, how a good majority of folks who were there the first time did not attend. I'm just not going to get into characterizing why he did this, the direction that he wanted to take this is just not for me to do. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karine, and thanks, Abdullah, for your help over the years. So my question, the House Judiciary Chairman, Jim Jordan, tweeted out a series of internal Facebook emails today showing that influenced the White House to remove some posts the administration didn't like. It's been about 3 weeks since the judge restricted access from certain agencies communicating with social media. How much is the White House now working with social media companies to remove concern posts or things they don't want?
So what I can say is, honestly, on this, because it's an ongoing case, I would refer you to the Department of Justice on this and the status of this case. As you know, we're going to be very careful here about speaking about this. So I will just let them deal with this.
Is the White House still communicating with social media companies?
So look, as I've repeated many times from here, we have promoted responsible actions to protect public health, safety, and security when confronted by challenges like a deadly pandemic and foreign attacks on our elections. And we have consistently made clear that we believe social media companies have a critical responsibility to take account of the effects of their platforms that they have on the American people while making independent decisions about the content of their platforms. That continues to be the case. That has not changed on what we believe here, but there's a specific case ongoing, and so I would refer to the Department of Justice.
And on the GDP statement today, over the 2.4% growth of the GDP, the president said that he's touting real wages are higher than pre-pandemic. Real wages are up 0.4% in the last 30 months, and that's less than 1% increase over the past 2.5 years. It doesn't really help folks buy food. So what do you say to those people who are seeing their wages not pay for as much food as much?
Just to be very clear, we are accounting for inflation when we say wages are at 1.2% higher, and then they were last year, which was at 0.7% higher than before the pandemic. So that is indeed something that we're accounting for. And so, there is a strong job market that exists. The inflation, as you know, has been easing for 12 months straight in a row, 12 months in a row. And so wages are rising, and there's even more low and middle wage workers, which is also important as we look at the data, as we look at the direction this economy is going. And that's helping us catch up from decades of widening wages that we have seen.
Thank you, Karine. There are new reports about back-channel talks, negotiations between the U.S. and Russia, supposedly conducted by former U.S. officials. Are you aware of any such regular contacts, and is there any involvement on the U.S. government's part in those negotiations?
I'm not going to go into, I'm not going to get into reporting on conversations outside of the government. And I'm certainly not going to get into diplomatic conversations that we may be having with Russia. That's not something that I'm going to do from here.
Hey, great. The tax matter that had Hunter Biden in court in Wilmington yesterday, it had criminal information saying that he hadn't paid 1.2 to about 1.5 million in taxes owed. So my question is, number one, I know the president doesn't talk to him, you said, about his business, but was he aware at the time that he wasn't filing his returns in a timely fashion? And also, did he ever advise him to pay? Because Hunter testified in court that 1 year he was sober when he didn't file. So did they ever discuss the tax situation?
I'm not going to get into the specific of the case.
Does he think it might have to beef up
I've
enforcement?
answered this question over and over again. Nothing has changed from the statement that I made yesterday. Nothing's going to change from the few times that I've gotten this question in the briefing room. We're not going to comment on this. This is an independent investigation that is being led by a Trump-appointed prosecutor, that is being led by clearly the Department of Justice, right? The prosecutors I just mentioned, and we're just not going to comment on this.
You mentioned DOJ. Does he have any concerns that the deal prosecutors put together fell apart and couldn't make it by a judge?
We're not going to comment on specifics of the case.
Thank you, Karine. Just want to ask you if you could to preview tomorrow's trip to Maine, what's going to be accomplished or what you hope will be accomplished, and also why was Maine chosen for this event?
So he's going to visit a manufacturing facility, which I think is important, right? As we're talking about bringing manufacturing back to the country and creating jobs, good paying jobs. And so he'll discuss how Bidenomics is revitalizing the American manufacturing and bringing investments, like I said, and jobs back to communities. Big investments that many communities have never seen before, as it relates to jobs and as it relates to making sure that we're making things in America again. And so he will announce new actions promoting domestic manufacturing of new technologies in America. And as you know, we've announced more than $1.5 billion in investments in Maine infrastructure, including $570 million for funding for high-speed internet. And so public investment from this president's legislative accomplishments are helping to revitalize local legacy industries like textiles. So that's what he's going to be doing tomorrow. It is going to be his first time in Maine. Like the president said, he's a president for everyone. And so we're excited to go there. He's excited to be there to make this announcement, and critical, important announcement to not just the constituents of Maine, the American people of Maine, but also to the country.
Separately, you suggested reaching out to the Italian embassy as it relates to why there is no press conference today, no joint press conference.
No, that's not what I said. Why they are proceeding to move in the direction that they are moving.
Okay. I did. I reached out to them
Okay,
during the briefing,
great.
and what they said was, we didn't insist, knowing that you would not accept. Is that accurate? What you
I have
say?
no idea. I mean, you're asking me to comment on something that they said. I haven't even spoken to the team yet, so I can't comment on what you're reporting right now. I have to talk to the team. What I can say, it's not a unilateral decision. It's a conversation that happens with the visiting country. Don't have anything more to share on that. As they are proceeding with the way that they want to communicate, that's on them to speak to. That's not on us to speak to.
Is there any reason, just to tie this up,
Yeah,
is there any
sure.
reason why it would be rejected? That idea of a joint press conference would be
Like I
rejected?
said, it's not a unilateral decision. It is a conversation that we have with the other country. So I can't speak to specifics on that. Go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, Karine. 2.5 questions, and thanks to all the colleagues and all the members of the staff that are leaving. I want to get all that in. As for climate change, I just want to drill down a bit on that. In Lithuania, the president said that it is the greatest existential threat that we face, and the window is closing. Since then, there's been no meaningful legislation introduced in Congress. During the congressional break, will the president be working with his allies in Congress to up the legislation to address climate change?
Inflation Reduction Act. That was
Other than that, yes.
I mean, but we can't poo-poo that. That was an incredibly important piece of legislation that we are currently implementing. Look, the Inflation Reduction Act is going to make it's going to make a real significant investment as we're talking about climate change. We have never seen that type of piece of legislation before under any administration. So that is important. That is important. That is critical. Of course, the president is always going to take steps to move forward as he sees the climate crisis, the climate change as a crisis, as he said from the beginning of this administration. And so, of course, we're always going to look on ways. But he has had the most ambitious policy, not just legislation, but also policies as well.
Well, I just wondered if he was working on additional legislation, but
We're always looking on ways, and we've already had ambitious policies to deal with climate crisis.
Second one, and I just want to drill down a little bit on the Hunter Biden thing. And I think this will cut to, I'm not going to ask you to speak to anything other than this administration. Can you state categorically that the administration has neither sought nor received favorable treatment from the DOJ for any investigation into the president, members of the administration, his family, or former President Donald Trump?
Absolutely not. The Department of Justice is independent. The president respects the rule of law. He has been saying that since he was before president, and that will remain the case.
And then finally, just as far as the questions about the president's health, I think that would be all cleared up if, once again, if we could just ask him to step out of that door into this room for 45 minutes. And so I ask you again to pass that along to him, to ask him to come out and see us.
I appreciate the request. Thank you for the request. The president, as you know, again, I appreciate the question, and I get it, and the president understands. You guys want to ask him questions and have the opportunity for him to answer your questions. I do want to say this is a president that has done more in the first 2.5 years when it comes to the economy, when it comes to really giving the American people a little bit of breathing room than any other president. All you got to do is look at the data. All you got to do is look at where we are in this country. There was a conversation for almost 2 years about a recession, and now you have economists saying that because of the work that this president has done these past 2 years, we're not headed in that way. And so, this is a president that wakes up every morning thinking about the American people and doing that job and doing the work, and you see that. You see that, again, in historic pieces of legislation, whether it's the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. That was a joke. Infrastructure Week was a joke. And now we're talking about infrastructure decade. Chips and Science Act, we're able to do that in a bipartisan way. You're going to see the president in Maine tomorrow talking about how to bring jobs back to this country, how to bring manufacturing back to this country. Things that the last administration was trying to do, and it was a joke. And this president is actually making it happen. So I'm going to just keep talking about that, keep laying that out. But I get that, but you'll hear him talk about that tomorrow. You will. Okay. Oh. Oh, okay. I don't see anybody. Oh, there we go.
Hi, how are you? This is Biden's first time coming to Maine as president. Can you share why he chose to come to Maine now and specifically to Auburn?
Oh, my goodness. I think I just answered that question. So he... I'm his first time ever in Maine. No, as president. Okay. As president. This is the first time that he's visiting Maine as president. He's going to, and hello, hi, what's your name?
Sorry, my name is Lana Cohen.
And you, which publication are you from?
I work for the Portland Press Herald of Portland.
Well, thank you for joining us. As you just mentioned, this is the president's first time visiting Maine as president, as Andrea clearly cleared us up for us. So he's going to be visiting a manufacturing facility to discuss how Bidenomics is revitalizing American manufacturing. As you know, for the past couple of months, we've been talking about investing in America and how the president's really key pieces of his legislation, like the Chips and Science Act, the bipartisan infrastructure legislation, and so many others, have helped create good union-paying jobs, and so this is part of that conversation that you'll hear from the president, promoting domestic manufacturing of new technologies in America, and we've announced, as you know, $1.5 billion in investments in Maine's infrastructure, including $570 million for funding for high-speed internet. And so you're going to hear directly from the president. He wants to make sure that the American people get to hear from him directly, and the people of Maine are going to be able to do that. We're going to have the governor of Maine, Janet Mills, who will be in attendance as well. And so the president's surely looking forward to visiting tomorrow, his first time as president. All right.
Could you provide any more information about his visit? Is he going to be attending anything else besides the Auburn manufacturing?
So we're going to have a call later today to kind of preview the visit, as we normally do the day before each visit. And so, and also we'll have after that call, we'll certainly release more information so we can do a little bit deeper dive on what the president's doing tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lena. All right, everybody, have a great weekend, or we'll see you tomorrow and have a great weekend. Still one more day to go. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.